This is Liz Colburn, host of The Morning Uplift. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily, and I'm back here with Lindsay and Elisabeth today, and we're here to talk nerdy to you.
And today we're actually talking about common nerd problems. We all have different things that we tend to struggle with being a nerd, such as very recently I almost had my nerd card taken away from me because I am a self-proclaimed Marvel Cinematic Universe nerd, and yet I haven't watched a lot of the shows that are out there right now, Jessica Jones and Legends of Tomorrow and Punisher, so I was very worried about that kind of thing happening, but also going to a store and seeing something as cool as a Doctor Who necklace and that moment when you suck in the air and everyone around you thinks you're about to have just a health episode. Those kinds of things are all problems that we all share. Elisabeth and Emily and I got to talking about other things that we are friends with, and even something like using the real universe and a universe that's made up in one of your fandoms and trying to figure out how things would happen if they were in that universe versus the real universe. So we've got a list of things we want to talk about, and we're going to just jump right into it.
All right. Well, I think probably one of the bigger issues is, now that nerd things are kind of catching on more and more and movie adaptions are coming out, there's a lot of things that, you have to reconcile between the source material and the movies, especially since they are both, different mediums. Obviously, they can't always be exact, but sometimes, the changes are a little bit more major. Especially, like, say, one of my biggest things was the big changes in Civil War, the movie versus the comic books, making a very black and white issue into kind of a more gray area was just very, kind of like hard to reconcile. So, and I think that's probably something that a lot of nerds, have issues with, just coming to terms with watching these things on screen and then going like, hey, that's not what really happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. Especially coming from the perspective of like reading all of the Harry Potter books as they came out and then watching all of the movies as they came out as well. Big thing for me. Like we did an episode. I think that was my first episode that I did with Elisabeth was all those differences between Harry Potter books and Harry Potter movies. And we didn't even touch on all of them. So we just touched the ones that like bothered us the most, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah, like that, it's just the reconciling can be hard. So I totally agree right there. Definitely on my list.
It always kind of baffles me when they make up characters in a movie or they make up characters in a TV show that weren't in the comic book or the novel, or they're completely different than they were when they were written by the author. And you really have to decide whether or not you are okay with that. And a lot of times, when we read the books first and then we see the movies, or see the television shows, that's one of the major issues that always seems to come up, where you have to decide whether or not this character that was never even written by the author is someone you like or someone you don't, and whether or not you care if they die or not, or how they die. I had that problem with Walking Dead, where they had characters that were really significant to the concept of life and death and learning to live again when there's a zombie apocalypse. And there were characters like Daryl and Glenn who were real consistent with the comic book versus just completely made up. And you really loved them, but you knew that the directors and the producers of the show had all of this liberty where they could just kill the person off, and it was constantly, okay, how are they going to do it? When are they going to do it?
Yeah.
What am I in for? Do I like this character? And of course, we all loved Carol, and I don't know if you guys even liked Walking Dead, but I had that problem all the time because I was up to date with the comic books and was just waiting for them to take these characters that I loved in the TV show and get rid of them because they weren't important to where Kirkman went with the rest of the comic books, so they could do whatever they wanted, and people loved them. But it was constant anxiety and stress, not knowing what was going to happen. And when you love a character that's made up like that, it is rough.
Well, and that's another one in and of itself too, is getting attached to characters,
right?
Because
ones that you really love.
Yeah, exactly, because you never know what the authors or writers are going to do with them, and if you get attached to certain characters, especially Game of Thrones is like notorious for this, is making really likable characters, and then but they died. So
or making characters that you really hate and then not killing them off for the longest time.
Yes, like making them last too long when they're obviously unnecessary, and you know that they're going to die, but they're just still there for whatever reason.
Right.
Like, come on, just get rid of them. Yep.
And, that's kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with intellectual property falling into the wrong hands or into the hands of somebody who doesn't care as much. Not necessarily always like companies like, well, I mean, obviously there's Fox in the Fantastic Four and Fox in most of the X-Men movies and Sony and Spider-Man, Schumacher's Batman movies, Michael Bay's Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, I mean, there's lots of instances where, you see something that you really, really love and then you watch it fail. And there's just this moment of heartbreak where it's like, how good it can be and how much it means to you, but to see it done so badly, it just kind of breaks your heart a little bit.
Right. Or even the series Firefly, when, it could have been handled so much better. And then, Fox handled that one as well. Sorry, Fox. Just is how it's going. It could have been handled so much better, and it could have had more success when it was on the air. But Firefly just didn't do as well as Fox wanted it to because they didn't do what Joss Whedon wanted them to do with it. And Joss Whedon had a plan, but Fox didn't want to follow it.
Yeah, that I think is a theme for Fox.
I know. Sorry, Fox. Maybe you should figure stuff out. I don't know. But yeah, and then one of the things that just nerd problems for me, like if I'm in an obscure fandom, like, because for me Stargate is one of my favorite shows ever, and there's 3 different Stargate shows, and so right now I'm in the second show, Atlantis, which has it crosses over with the Stargate SG-1 series, but like I try to talk to people about it and they're like, don't you mean like Star Trek, Star Wars? No, Stargate, it's different. I have no hardly any other friends that I can share that with. There's not a ton of people out there that also know Stargate, but it was so good.
Yeah, I have that problem with some of my fandoms too. Like, I mean, I am obviously involved in some bigger fandoms like Marvel and Supernatural, but, I'm also interested in write stuff for smaller fandoms like Hellraiser and stuff like that. And it's like, you start talking about this stuff and then people are like, what? And then most people are like, oh, wait, that movie with the pinhead, and it's like, you really don't know what you're talking about. But okay, like, I mean, at least you've heard of it, but still, it's not the same thing. Like, right. I'm the kind of person that read the novella that inspired the movie, so, that's where I'm coming from. And you're coming from, oh, well, it's the guy with the pins on his head. So it's like, it's two totally different things, and you don't really connect, even though you both know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's funny. The other day, I was I've also been doing this CrossFit thing recently, and it's not a bunch of like lugheads or anything, but someone posted a meme about her being sick, and it was a little thing from Battlestar Galactica where the president is suffering from cancer, and she's like taking her last breaths, and it's this very dramatic scene, and it's this meme, and she must have looked it up or something and just said that she was ill or sick or something. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think that's Battlestar Galactica. So my next comment wasn't, oh, I hope you feel better soon, or, gee, sorry to hear that you're not feeling well. What I actually said was, is that the president in Battlestar Galactica? And 2 days later, when she was probably feeling better, she messaged me and said, yes, it was. And that connection was made, but it was so random and silly, and just the funniest thing to see things like that happen too, and for it to be these tiny weird odd connections of and I was sad that maybe she didn't know it was a meme from Battlestar Galactica. Maybe she didn't know, and that's why I was waiting for 2 days, because I thought, wait, maybe she just looked up ill and she didn't even know what it was from. Oh, right. What tragedy that would have been.
Yeah. Ugh. And it's so fun to like actually find somebody who actually is part of that fandom too, and you're like, oh my goodness, I have somebody else I could talk to this about.
I've got a friend who will understand these problems.
Exactly, which is super great. Yeah, or like if we were trying to remember super obscure details about our fandoms, and we don't even remember what happened earlier in the day, or like what we had for breakfast. It's like, oh yeah, you can list off all the names of these people who died in Game of Thrones, but I don't know what I did yesterday. It's not important.
There's a line in a Doctor Who episode where lately there's been a lot of people my age getting pregnant and having babies, Emily, where I've been wanting so badly to be able to come up to somebody who is also a Doctor Who fan and do in my best Matt Smith voice, oh, look at you! You swallowed a planet! But I don't know how many people will understand that reference to when Matt Smith sees Amelia Pond after not being around for about 9 months.
Right,
so,
exactly.
Everybody around me who I could possibly say that to, who is pregnant or has been pregnant recently, would probably be extremely offended by me saying that.
Right. Yeah. They would have
but
no idea.
Emily, if you were back here in Wisconsin, I would totally at least know that would be gathered on you, and we'd have a good laugh about it.
And at this point, yes, it does look like I have swallowed a planet, because we're about 3 weeks out from my due date. So,
yay!
Yeah. Yep, it does look like there's a small planet in here. Thankfully, it's a child, not a planet.
Right. But yeah, like remembering quotes like that and things that you want to say, or ways that you even want to bring things up and talk to other people, and not being able to do that because they wouldn't get the reference. Truth be told, they wouldn't get the reference.
Yeah, exactly. Like risking not getting the reference, but also risking hey, we could actually have a bonding moment right now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I was talking earlier about how we can remember these things about our fandoms and the shows we watched years ago, days ago, books we've read, and not being able to remember exactly what I did this morning, or my list of groceries that I need to go get later today, things that are here in the real world, and being able to remember things about our fandoms that are much more important, obviously. Oh, I'm sorry. I started reading Ready Player One. Did either of you guys read that yet?
Oh, I have not.
This is a random interjection.
It's a book?
No, I haven't actually.
It's a book, and it's coming out as a movie soon.
Yeah, I knew that. I didn't know there was
they
a
have.
book.
I only started reading it. I'm only 40 pages in or so, but I'm super excited because there's all kinds of references to all kinds of fandoms and nerdy things too.
It's like the
80s
ultimate
stuff.
crossover.
Yes. It's what the book says something about it being like Willy Wonka meets the Matrix, or Harry Potter for adults, and I was like, wait a second, hold on, the grown-ups Harry Potter? I am a grown-up, and I love Harry Potter. Yeah. Exactly. But it talks about this multimillionaire, and I'm not going to give away too much, so I'm going to, but there's a lot of like 80s pop culture stuff that they reference to, and this is obviously set in the future, but it's really cool to see these little things show up in a book written this way, because it reminds me of this nerdy problem of just loving nerdy pop culture and interjecting it into your life and being able to use it to connect with people. And to what they do in the book is they make a big game out of trying to find things, and you have to use what you know and what you've learned and researched to get the ultimate prize. So it's really relevant to having this wealth of knowledge that only some people can understand.
Yeah, exactly. Like you start speaking nerd to people and they don't understand a single sentence. Like my mother-in-law, who, she'll try to listen to this podcast and she's like, yeah, the terminology was just way over my head. And I'm like, oh, if only you knew. There's a whole world out here.
Right.
Yeah, I think the only kind of issue sometimes that comes up with nerds connecting is that the more that nerds connect, the more that there's a propensity to run into what I like to call toxic fans, or people who kind of take it upon themselves to determine what makes a fan a real fan. I know there was a particular guy in a Facebook group that I'm in, he used to be, and he was very arrogant, and he was like, if I've been reading comic books since I was a kid, and if you just started by reading the movies or by watching the movies and reading some comic books now, then you aren't a real fan. And I'm like, I grew up in a family where I wasn't allowed to do this. It's not really my fault. It's not really, on you to determine what makes a fan a real fan. If somebody is introduced to something through a movie, I think that's great. Yeah. Like I say, if you watch Captain America or the Avengers and then you want to go and read the comic books, I mean, to me, that's how I got into the comic books. I wanted to read the source material. Because I normally, am a stickler for, reading the books before I see the movies. But in some cases, I have not quite attained that. But, to me, it doesn't matter how you get into something. Did you get into it? Did you enjoy it? Did you love it? Okay, then you're a fan. You don't have to know every single thing about a comic book. You don't have to know every single thing about Lord of the Rings. You haven't had to read every single appendice entry. You don't have to be able to speak some weird dialect of Elvish, to be a real fan.
Right.
You're just a fan. And, it kind of brings the fandom's experience down a little bit when people want to appoint themselves,
to be a better fan.
Yeah, to be, I'm a better fan than you. You're not a real fan. It just kind of ruins it a little bit. And or conversely, people who think that you're not a real fan if you criticize something. And personally, just because I like something, that doesn't mean it's immune from criticism. I love Supernatural. I will criticize it up one side and down the other if I think it deserves it. Same thing for everything else. Like, I think in the last episode we were talking about Thor Ragnarok. I loved I liked the movie, but there were a lot of problems with it, and I can discuss it frankly while still enjoying the movie. And there are some people out there who think, oh, well, if you criticize this in any way, you're not a real fan. You have to like every single thing that comes out and support it 100%,
Like, taking Thor Ragnarok for an example, like, that's one person's interpretation of what that story should be. And there's probably a billion other interpretations of what the story of Thor Ragnarok could have been. And so, taking one person's interpretation, sure, you can go ahead and criticize it because it's not the same as what you would have done.
Right.
That's fine.
Well, and see, what I think is interesting is I almost kind of think I'm a better fan because I can criticize things and take criticism back as well. Just because I might be new to a fandom doesn't mean that I'm less of a fan, but the fact that I can intellectually think about those worlds and those characters and that character development, I almost feel like that is what we are supposed to be getting out of these things and these headcanons, to be honest, that we can we can share this information, we can learn from it, and we can talk to each other about it, and come up with something that might even be what we didn't think about before. You get a lot of that toxic fan and interesting dynamics with people as well when you come down to animes that have been dubbed, or they have the really bad translations, or when they've been done in America voiceovered very poorly, when they change things like in Sailor Moon for the Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune not being lesbians, and instead making one of them a male. When they did that and switched things over, you have to decide whether or not that you're still a fan, if you agreed with that or if you disagreed with that, or if you watch it in Japanese or if you don't. And that is like the toxic fan thing too, to see people who get really angry about that, or they say you're not as much of a fan as me because you didn't watch them with the with the subtitles as opposed to the dubbing.
The whole subbed versus dubbed debate.
Yes.
Ever.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, when I was 10 and I was trying to read the subtitles, that was rough. But give me a few years and I definitely enjoyed the Japanese better, because it was the original. It was the way it was meant to be watched.
Yeah.
And the things that they came over with the subtitles, sometimes the subtitles are great and the dubbing wasn't quite exactly right. They recently started redoing Sailor Moon in particular, and a lot of the animation has been refined and done better, but the stories I remember from being a little girl are a little different now because that change happened, and that's what I remember from being younger. So it's hard for me to really watch those shows again and try and remember exactly what was the propensity of that episode when I was 10, 12 years old.
Yeah. And because you know you have different experiences now, so you probably relate to things a little differently too.
Exactly, and I really don't like her so much as I did back then. But that's because I do have different experiences now than I did as well. Right.
I think one of definitely speaking like, you know, going back to a fandom that you maybe haven't watched in a while and identifying with other characters. When I very first read the book The Outsiders, you know, I think pretty much a lot of people, if not most people, have, you know, read that book in school. And I read it in 6th grade. And, you know, I pretty much loved all of the characters, but the older brother, Derry, who took care of Soda and Ponyboy. And, you know, I was like, oh, he's always so hard on them. Like, why was he so hard on them? And, like, I look back on that now and I'm like, Derry was the only sane one in that entire group. Like, he was supposed to be 20 years old, taking care of a 16 and 14-year-old with those attitudes. Like, oh my God, like, he is a saint. You know, I'm like, I don't understand how he could have ever thought that he was such a stick in the mud when, you know, I look back on that now and I'm like, nope, he really took care of them and he really loved his brothers.
Yeah. So yeah, like your perspective totally changes if you look back on stuff after you've seen it. Another thing, this is completely unrelated to that, a nerd problem that my husband and I sometimes have is like, so we like athletics and sports and things, but we don't really keep track of like the professional teams that everyone else seems to. But we really love watching esports, specifically League of Legends. And so right now we're in the middle of League of Legends season, and we're like, so we're friends with like athletic sports fans, and we'll pay attention to like professional baseball and football from time to time, but like we really like our esports. So we're like, we have like don't know who else to talk to about like, oh my goodness, 100 Thieves, they were doing great, and then all of a sudden they lost yesterday. What are we like you know, we're trying to keep track of our teams that we love on our League of Legends games, but who else do we have to talk to about that thing? It's another like obscure thing that as nerdy fans we're like, oh, well, we wanted to watch that game, but we have friends that want to come over and hang out too.
What I think is really interesting is when you have to sit around and you're watching a video game or a television show, and an actor's voice comes through and you recognize the voice, and you have to go on IMDb and start looking for the show you're currently watching, and, you know, depending on what venue you're on, you might have to do a little bit of research that way. But then finding out that show, that actor, that person's character's name, and then checking that actor up against IMDb so that you can find out what you know them from. I do that with a friend of mine several times, where we have to try and decide what movie or show he knows that actor from, and then, of course, what I know them from, too, and where we recognize the voices.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then they'll cross over from one fandom to the other, and you have to try and keep them straight. Like, especially for me, Mark Shepard, because he's like in 3 different shows that I really love, and you have to try and remember his name in all of them.
I can't get over that he is in Battlestar Galactica and you guys never watched it, because he's in that and he plays a very similar character to who he plays in Supernatural, but not as far as the essence of the character, but just him as an actor, as a person. It's just very
like him.
stoic, matter of fact. Yeah, it's very it's very interesting for me to see these people come on and be themselves and have this completely different backstory, character, MO in whatever show they're in.
And conversely, you know, sometimes finding out after the fact that a certain person has voiced a character, and then you have to go back and, like, listen to it, like, okay, do I hear this? Does this sound like this person? Like, I mean, obviously I know this is this person, but does this sound like this person? Like, I found out after I started playing Skyrim, I found out that a particular dragon was voiced by, named Parthenax, was voiced by the same guy who voices Mario. And I still I have gone back every single time, and I can't hear it. It's completely different. So, I mean, I know obviously it is the same guy, but it really does not sound like him at all.
Yeah, it'll play tricks on you. And then there's the other voice actors who will sound exactly the same in everything. Or like Nathan Fillion, who voices one of the leaders of one of the, what is it called? One of the classes in Destiny. And his voice is exactly the same. And he has this hilarious temperament. And you know it's Malcolm Reynolds, but he's just like having fun with this role as this Destiny character. And I'm like, oh, this is great. But you know it's him. You can hear that it's him too. He's just like, it's a video game character as opposed to his face.
It was hard for me to see him also in Castle, too, because all I saw was Mal, and I was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why can't I wrap my head around him being this guy? I think I watched a few episodes when it was on TV. Mm-hmm. And that one was weird for me. I watched it a couple times on TV, and to be fair, I didn't really know a whole lot about what was going on in the show, but it was Mal, and he was just dressed in a suit and tie, and I was really, what?
Instead of his brown trench coat and suspenders, right?
Yes. Yep.
I'm waiting for the next season of stuff.
Oh, yes. Especially...
There's so many things.
Especially, I think Sherlock and Game of Thrones fans especially can commiserate with this because, we have had to wait so long. I mean, Sherlock fans in particular have had to develop the biggest patience of all, definitely. But Game of Thrones fans, we're kind of used to having, new seasons come out, at like clockwork, but all of a sudden, like these last few seasons, they've just been throwing us for loops, and now the new season isn't going to come out until the last, and I think it's the very last season. It's not going to come out until 2019. And
I know, that's a whole year from now, guys.
Yes!
What? Right? Well, and then Sherlock fans, even if you have to wait a year or 18 months or whatever, you're waiting that long for what, 3-4 episodes?
Yeah, they have waited literal years for 3 episodes.
3 episodes.
I feel that same way about like Doctor Who, though. I think I saw the date being later this year, maybe in the fall, and I haven't even really watched very much of Peter Capaldi, even though I really, really, really want to. But I'm just behind, and I think, okay, but I've got to wait to see the female Doctor Who until the end of this year? Really? Why?
Yeah,
that kind of thing is always like, why do we gotta wait for Jodie Whittaker for such a long time? And of course, I'm watching her do conventions and things, and I'm thinking, okay, how do I cosplay that? How am I going to take her outfit and cosplay that? And always wanting to cosplay everything because I always want to.
Super fun.
Just trying to find out. Okay, is that a blue T-shirt? Is she wearing brown pants? Are those suspenders with? I need more. I need more details. I need to be cosplaying this way before October.
This sounds like another nerd problem here, like cosplaying perfectly.
Oh, and judging others' cosplays too, but also being super excited about what they were able to do with their costumes, what they interpreted, what they did well, what they didn't do so well, and then also looking at other people's finances and abilities, because there's a very big disconnect between people who cosplay for fun and people who have the funding.
Right.
There's a lot of talent out there in the cosplay world, and there's a lot of really amazingly talented people who can get materials and get their seamstress skills together and make some amazing things. But then there's people like me who really need to rely on other people and how much I've got in the bank account to dress up as Linda Belcher or Agent Carter or whoever I'm hoping to go as.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's something to keep in mind when you go cosplay. It's like, everybody has their own different levels and everybody has their own different, abilities and resources, and whatever they can do is fantastic because that's what they wanted to do and that's what they were able to do.
But a lot of times you see a lot of enveloping admiration among cosplayers and fans too, even though one costume might be vastly different and possibly not as good as so-and-so's. There's still a very awesome embracing culture there too.
Yeah, it connects you because even though two people could cosplay the same person, one at a really high level and one at a more average level, they still went for the same person, and that's really cool because then they can have some kind of connection between each other.
Yes, that connection, absolutely.
So awesome. Well, thanks for getting nerdy with us today. I had a lot of fun talking with both of our co-hosts, all three of us on one episode, which is fantastic. Finally, I know. And it's not going to be like this for long because I'm going to be having a baby soon, guys. And so I'll kind of be a little busy because that will be my third baby. And so I will be out for a little while for family time. So if you hear an episode, we'll let you know when the time comes what's going on. But if you hear an episode, there will be an announcement that says you're probably listening to this because Emily had her baby. We're going to be prepared for that. So you won't be missing episodes when I'm gone, just to let you all know. We will keep you updated and we will keep you supplied with episodes every Friday, just like we have been. So just because I'm gone doesn't mean the show's gone, I promise. We've got two very capable co-hosts as well that are, as you've seen the last 2 weeks here, are more than capable of taking it by themselves, which is wonderful. But anyways, we'd love for you to talk nerdy to us. What are your #nerd problems? Find us on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, Beauties and Headcanons. Just go ahead and search, and also share your nerdy topic suggestions with us too. For sure, subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media, which makes this show possible, on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever else good podcasts are found.
We love feedback, so if you liked this episode, or even if you didn't, please give us a rating and a review so we can keep making great episodes for you.
I'm Elisabeth.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Emily, and thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.